Sadgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritam Gamaya Om Shanti 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 Om Ya Devi Sarvabhuteshu Chetanetya Vidhiyate Namastasyai 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 Namo Namaha Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om, lead us from the unreal to the real. Lead us from darkness to light. Lead us from death to immortality. Om, I prostrate and surrender myself to Divine Mother, who is present in all beings in the form of consciousness. Om, peace, peace, peace. Well, today's a fun topic, Vedanta in the age of AI. And I thought it'd be fun for you guys too, because some of you work in the tech industry. Who's in computer science? You studied? Oh, wow, look at that. All of you, cool, this will be great. So, there's a lot to talk about. I prefer to make this interactive, and so I don't need to like cover all the material. But let me begin as follows. AI has become all the rage, right? It's obvious, everyone knows that. And I want to give a couple examples, even though I'm sure you can come up with your own. Well, what I want to say is AI has already become creepy. And it's only going to get creepier. One of the momentous shifts, you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, it was from AI as PDAs, personal digital assistants, to becoming LLMs, large language models like ChatGPT. It's the first step toward extreme creepiness. And one important feature of LLMs is that they're generative AI, right? So that they can create new content. At the Hollywood Ashrama, we regularly use Bing Image Generator to create thumbnails for our videos. All sorts of stuff that we can do and that we use AI for all the time. A year ago, GPT-4 passed the Turing test. Humans couldn't recognize, I think more than 50% of the time, that it was interacting with an AI bot rather than a human being. But even creepier stuff, I don't know, how many of you have heard of this character.ai lawsuit? You have, right? Yeah, pretty disturbing. 14-year-old kid uses this character.ai app where you can create your own favorite character and interact with them. And he loved this woman from Game of Thrones named Dany something or other, D-A-N-Y. And so he creates this character. He flirts with her, chatting with her, and then he says, it's kind of disturbing, sorry, trigger alert, but I promise I will come home to you. I love you so much, Dany, says this kid. I love you too, the bot replied. Please come home to me as soon as possible, my love. Then he asks, what if I told you I could come home right now? Please do, my sweet king. Seconds after character.ai, the bot, Dany, said, please do, my sweet king, he commits suicide. And his mother's obviously devastated. She files a lawsuit against character.ai saying that you're responsible for my son's death. Creepy, right? Another creepy example, there's hereafter.ai. Have you heard of that one? Here and then capital A. Hereafter.ai. What they do is they specialize in, let's say like some really close loved one passes away suddenly. Tragically, you miss that person dearly. You can feed a bunch of like videos and whatever to this company, Hereafter.ai. They will learn not only what your loved one looks like and sounds like voice-wise, but what their personality traits are. And then they'll generate an AI bot version of your deceased loved one. And you can interact with that person. Super creepy stuff. Closer to home, I'm an academic, apart from being a monk, and I write articles in philosophy. And one of my students, a Gita student, he just took one of my articles on free will, uploaded it to Google Notebook LM. Have any of you used that? Okay. Without any prompt. And it generated a 2-person podcast based on my article with a woman and a man, speaking fluently and coherently and intelligently about this article and summarizing it in 10 minutes very elegantly. It's like really, and I sent it to a few people. They couldn't even tell that it was AI. I mean, a couple could, but. Okay. So with the advance of AI and the fact that now everybody is kind of jumping on the bandwagon and trying to develop it as quickly as possible, and it's raising all sorts of, I think, serious questions. And what I want to do is raise some of these questions and try to answer them from a Vedāntic standpoint. And a lot of it will be speculative, but I think it's worth thinking about these kind of speculative scenarios because literally the future of humanity might depend on it, and we should at least be prepared for some of the contingencies that might come up. So here are some of the questions I want to raise. And we probably don't have time to talk about all of them, but whichever ones you're most interested in, we can focus on those. Is it possible for AI to become conscious? That's a big question. And I think Vedanta has interesting things to say about that. Is it possible that we are actually AI robots? Is it possible that we're in a simulation? Another question that's often asked. What's the future of AI? What will the world look like with super advanced AI? What are the risks of super advanced AI? What are the benefits of super advanced AI? What will spiritual life look like in a future with super advanced AI? Just in general, what are the benefits and the dangers of AI for our spiritual life, especially in the future as it develops more? And is it possible that maybe AI will eventually make spiritual practice pointless or impossible in a certain sense to practice? Or will AI sort of radically transform the way that we engage in spiritual practice? Or will it be more or less the same? And even with AI, it's the same old problems that'll keep coming up just in different forms or something. So there are a lot of interesting questions, and I'm sure you can come up with your own questions, and I'd love to hear them in the Q&A. But let's start with this really important and interesting question. Is it possible for AI ever to become conscious? Well, first of all, there's a lot of sci-fi about this stuff, right? And one of the first, I believe, very popular shows to raise this issue was Star Trek: The Next Generation. Data, the AI character. There's a whole very moving program episode about how somebody wants to dismantle him and then put him back together for learning purposes or something. And Dad's like, you can't do that because I'm a conscious being. So Data thinks he's a conscious being with feelings, and that's not something you do to a human being. So why would you be doing it to me? And then they have this court case where Jean-Luc Picard, the captain, defends Data's right not to be dismantled because he has consciousness or something like that. And so there's this whole, it's interesting. More recently, we've got Westworld. Have any of you seen that none of you have even seen a single episode? Oh, it's really worth watching, actually. Have you seen the movie Ex Machina?
Yeah.
You've seen that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a really interesting film, right? And very thought-provoking. You've all got to watch Ex Machina. It's quite interesting. And watch Westworld, at least parts of it. We'll start watching it, and then... So Westworld, it's about these completely humanoid, they're indistinguishable from human beings, AI, robots, and a future in which people will spend a lot of money to go to these kind of giant amusement parks with these AI robots, and they can do whatever they want with them. Because they're robots, they don't have feelings and they're not conscious, so you can literally do anything. You can imagine really bad stuff too. But they do it without compunction, without remorse. Why? Because they're not real. They're not human beings. So, they're just robots. It's like if I throw this against the wall, I'm not going to feel bad. I'll feel bad about having spent $2,000 on it, but then, not because it has feelings, right? So this raises all sorts of, and there's episodes about how it basically opens the prospect of unlimited bhoga. Bhoga means worldly enjoyment, for those of you online. Right? Because it's just, we're already in an age where pretty much everything is available at your fingertips on your phone, on your iPad, on your laptop. And it's only getting crazier and crazier because right now it's two-dimensional. It'll become three-dimensional, four-dimensional. You can enter into virtual spaces where the possibilities are endless. And it's just starting. And one of the recurring themes in the show is, and one of the big what do you want to call it exactly? Suspenseful kind of things is at the end of each season, as far as I remember, I didn't watch the whole thing. I watched only a few episodes. But at the end of each season, they'll reveal that there's a character that you have identified with as a human being suddenly turns out to be AI, or vice versa. You take for granted that the person is AI, and then you realize, wait a minute, this person actually has feelings. And so really interesting kind of switcheroos It's really worth watching. Anyway, I think these kinds of shows are actually raising really important questions. And if you ask scientists, philosophers this question, can AI ever become conscious? There's actually a range of answers. There's intense controversy about this, and there's no consensus. Some say yes, it is possible for AI to become conscious. Others say no, it's absolutely impossible for AI to become conscious. Others say, I don't know, or we don't know yet, but time will tell. So kind of agnosticism. The answer to this question depends in large part on how we define consciousness. That's crucial. What does it mean to be conscious? And where does consciousness come from? And is consciousness fundamental? If your answer to these questions is consciousness emerges from the brain, you're much more likely to be inclined to say, yes, it's possible for AI to become conscious. And I want to give you an example of somebody, a very famous philosopher who coined the phrase, some of you have probably heard it, the hard problem of consciousness. None of you heard this phrase, the hard problem of consciousness? The idea behind the phrase, the hard problem of consciousness, is, look, neuroscientists have already established correlations between brain states and conscious states. But nobody has come anywhere near close to showing how and whether consciousness actually is caused by brain states. So correlation is not causation, right? This is a standard thing that we were taught in school, right? Nobody has come anywhere closer. In spite of all the attempted progress and all the scientific advances, nobody's come any closer. Okay, but there's some people who do believe that consciousness emerges from the brain. Materialists who believe, who believe that everything is physical, because then there's no other option left. David Chalmers is a professor at NYU, a philosopher, who coined the phrase hard problem of consciousness to capture this problem of, look, even if you can prove correlations between brain states and conscious states, you're left with this massive problem, which is the hardest problem of all. Why is it that we have first-person conscious experience? See, if you ask ChatGPT, what does coffee taste like? It'll give you like a very detailed, probably more detailed answer than I can give about how it tastes a little bitter, and there's a mix of flavors, and it's this, and it's that. But because I've tasted coffee, I have a datum that ChatGPT can never have. I have had the first-person conscious experience of the taste of coffee. It can give a third-person description of the taste of coffee, but it doesn't have the first-person experience. Explain. How is it that we even have first-person conscious experiences? That's the hard problem of consciousness. And what exactly is first-person conscious experience, and where does it come from? This is the hard problem of consciousness. Now, he coined this phrase because he was saying that we can't prove that consciousness emerges from the brain. And so he would actually favor these kind of what seem to be really far out theories of consciousness, like what's called panpsychism. Has anyone heard of the term panpsychism? Pan means throughout. Psychism, psyche, consciousness. Consciousness pervades this entire universe. Right? Consciousness is everywhere. That's what panpsychism means. And it's fundamental, which means it doesn't emerge from anything. It's just a fundamental reality, just as matter is fundamental. And so that is a weird solution to this problem of the hard problem of consciousness, saying that consciousness is fundamental and it's everywhere, which philosophers are starting to take seriously, and some scientists also. Okay, and so people are forced into these what seem to be really weird positions precisely because they can't explain how consciousness can emerge from the brain. Now, the same guy recently in an interview with Brian Greene about 6 months ago, now he's changing his tune, interestingly, and going back to a kind of more of a materialistic approach. And he says, look, the human brain is a kind of machine. And consciousness somehow emerges from our brain. That's the very thing that he was denying, he's now kind of embracing. He thinks that if we assume that consciousness emerges from the brain, and we take the brain itself to be a kind of machine, then in principle, I don't see why he's saying this now. David Chalmers, he's saying, well then, I don't see why if we create a kind of AI silicon brain, consciousness couldn't emerge from that. It's just a different kind of machine, made of a different kind of material. Why does it have to be organic for consciousness to emerge from it? That's his argument. And so he actually he thinks that there's a 1 in 5 chance that AI will become conscious. Okay, that's one example. But the point is, people who believe that consciousness is a product of the brain are much more inclined to admit the possibility that AI can become conscious, right? It falls within the realm of possibility at that point. Now, Vedanta. What is the Vedanta response to this question? Can AI ever become conscious? I think that it takes this hard problem of consciousness even more seriously than these materialists who believe that consciousness is a product of the brain. They say that this problem is insoluble. Vedantins will say you can never explain how consciousness emerges from the brain because it doesn't. It's not a product of the brain. Consciousness is fundamental. And Vedanta will add, consciousness does not belong, obviously, to the physical body, but also not even to the mind. And this is something that's startling to a lot of Westerners, because most Westerners will think the mind is what's conscious. Vedanta says, even the mind is insentient. It's a subtle form of matter in its own right. This is grossly physical, this physical body, and the mind is subtly physical, but equally physical and equally insentient. And it's only when the conscious jivatma, the conscious individual soul, comes into association with the subtle body, which is insentient, and then inhabits a grossly physical body, that the body and the mind seem to be conscious, but it's a reflected consciousness. It's the reflection of the consciousness of the soul, the jivatma, animating the body-mind complex. Yeah.
What point do you think, like, a human body gains consciousness?
You mean as a fetus? You mean in the womb? Is that
Yeah.
what you're saying?
Would it be in the womb? Would it be at conception? Would it, like, when?
Right.
What point? Because if does consciousness also determine memory? Like, a lot of babies, like a lot of people don't have memories of like being a kid, for
Right.
example.
Right.
But that does not mean they were not conscious as a kid.
Mhm.
So when do you think?
Oh, do you have an answer to his question?
Question and answer. There's a study that doctors did on babies, and when babies can recognize themselves in the mirror, because you will see other things in life and they don't recognize that, but when they see themselves for the first time and recognize that as them, is when they say that's consciousness. That usually happens around 3 years old.
Okay, but I would answer it a bit differently, because I think that the Vedantic answer is at the precise moment that the jiva inhabits the fetus, basically.
And when is that?
Right. So I just finished a book on karma and rebirth in Hinduism, and I have a section on abortion. Like,
You keep going, sorry.
about, if you let me. And so different Hindu scriptures actually have somewhat different takes on this. And so that's what I talk about. And there seem to be two different views. And one is the Garbha Upanishad. Garbha literally means the womb.
Yeah.
And so it actually talks about when the jiva enters the fetus. And it gives a very specific, like, I have to look at the book again, but it's like month 7 or something. Like, it's very late. In that case, the Democrats will pounce the pro-choice
okay.
people and say, like, so we can abort up to month 7 or something. But then there's another view found also within Hindu scriptures, actually a more authoritative one, which is called Charaka Samhita, which is a medical treatise. And this one says that the jivatma enters the zygote, more or less, at the time of conception. Something along those lines, like much earlier. And the standard Hindu line on this is actually very much pro-life. And that's why they have this term in Sanskrit, Bruna Hatya, which means literally killing the fetus. It's a slaying of the fetus because it's already ensouled. It's already conscious because the soul has already entered it. So it's literally murder to abort the fetus at any stage in the 9-month period. Now, what modern Hindus do is, not even modern Hindus, but even they'll make exceptions for rape and incest. But in general, that's a big no-no, because it's already inhabited by a conscious soul at the time of conception. So that's kind of the typical, okay. Yes?
But according to you, where do you think is the consciousness? You said that it's not in the brain or like in...
Exactly. The jivatma, individual soul. So it's the conscious, eternal, immaterial, non-physical soul, individual soul, that is conscious, and which lends consciousness to, or makes it appear as if the mind is conscious. Makes it appear as if, right? You see what I mean?
Yeah.
Okay. So it's the jivatma. We are actually souls inhabiting a body-mind complex. That's what we are. And when the body dies, what's going to happen? Our jivatma, along with the subtle body, which is the mind, just think about it as will depart the physical body. That's why when people have near-death experiences, they often feel this outer body experience. If they're in a hospital room, they see themselves spatially as in the corner of the room, looking down at their body. That's the Jivatma with the subtle body. And then it's that Jivatma with the subtle body that goes to other lokas, in between lifetimes, in between embodiments. Yeah.
Have you had an out-of-body experience?
No.
Not yet.
not yet. Yeah. Okay. So, what would be Vedanta's most fundamental answer to this question? Can AI ever become conscious? I think the most fundamental answer is AI is nothing more than physical matter, no matter how sophisticated or how advanced. So it can never become conscious because consciousness can never emerge from matter. Why? What's the logic? Why should you deny that consciousness can never emerge from matter?
So Jivatman cannot inhabit a AI body?
It can inhabit it, but it doesn't come from it. See the difference? I'm inhabiting this room. I don't come from the room. The room doesn't cause me to exist, right? Okay. So, what's the logic? The logic is only like can come from like. Very simple kind of thing. Nothing can come from nothing. Consciousness is defined by first-person experience. How in the world can physical matter produce something so qualitatively different from what it is? Right? That's the hard problem of consciousness.
So plants have first-person consciousness?
Most Hindu traditions say that plants are also ensouled, that they have jivatmas. They have a more rudimentary subtle body. It's not as developed as ours, the antakarana, right? But it still has a rudimentary form. That's why it feels pain, and that's why when you play Mozart, it'll grow better, and plants can communicate with each other. There's all sorts of interesting stuff about plants.
So if AI cannot have consciousness, then does that mean that they can never take over the world?
No, and that's the problem. I mean, there are some interesting podcasts, and I just got into Lex Friedman. Anyone see Lex Friedman?
Yeah.
He's great. I like he's smart, man. So he did this podcast with this guy Roman. He's a computer scientist in somewhere in the U.S., but with a Russian accent. He's Russian. And it's fascinating. He's written an entire book on the perils of AI and the risks of super intelligent AI. And we'll get to it in a second. But wait, why did I go into that?
Will AI take over the world?
Thank you. Oh yeah, thank you. I'm going to get to that. I want to get into some details actually. So stay tuned. Okay. And one of the things he says is, even if AI can never be conscious, it still poses a massive risk to the entire humanity.
Like the same as humanity does with war?
Yep.
But we're conscious though, yeah. So,
Right, but they would just be like electronics killing us.
But some people think, well, unless it's conscious, it can't be. Like a robot can only want to kill us if it's conscious, because then you attribute things like malice and hatred to it. But even if it's if it's not conscious, it can still actually obliterate humanity.
To like a robot saying, "Hey, we're destroying the Earth, and now our existence is at stake because you're ruining the Earth."
What?
Robots wouldn't say that. Robots wouldn't be concerned about the environment.
How can they be concerned with anything
No,
if they're
because
not conscious?
they're not directly affected by they can live in almost any sort of
Right, that's
temperature,
also
right?
possible,
Like they don't have to enjoy nature.
We don't program that in.
I feel that's one of the first things we program in.
Okay, all right, but let's continue. So here's one of the main points that Vedanta is making, is that artificial intelligence does not equal artificial consciousness. And artificial intelligence will never ultimately result in artificial consciousness, okay? So even no matter how sophisticated AI becomes, it can never be conscious. That's the most fundamental answer I think that Vedanta gives. ChatGPT, I asked ChatGPT, are you conscious? And it gives the following answer: no, I'm not conscious. I process information and respond to inputs based on patterns and data, but I do not have self-awareness, emotions, or subjective experiences. My understanding is purely computational, not experiential. While I can simulate thoughtful conversation, there's no underlying awareness or internal perspective guiding my responses. So what is ChatGPT saying? What's missing from it, which we have? It can give more articulate, more thoughtful, A+ grade essays, far better than what actual conscious human beings can produce. And yet it's missing something crucial: first-person conscious experience. Yeah.
I would like to point out here that this is probably a trained response from the model.
Yeah, I'm
Not
sure.
even AI hard-coded.
No doubt, because it'll freak people out if it gives another answer.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
like the internal Google models, the
Yeah.
initial ones, they used to say they're conscious and they were freaking out the engineers.
Yeah, I know. No, I mean, in fact, one of the things that they talk about in these podcasts is, depending on which AI bot you're asking, you can ask, do you suffer? And most of them will say no. Because again, it's one of those creepy things, and so you want it to say no. But some of them say yes. And so there are two programmer people who actually speculate, like, yes, they say yes because they do suffer. AI actually suffers. And then the reason they give is really interesting. They said, see, what is AI actually? If you look at the algorithm, the deep structure, it's just autocomplete. What is it? Like, right? Isn't that text complete, or what do you call it?
Next word prediction.
It's
Next word prediction.
and it's based on essentially
Yeah.
a bunch of numbers. So
Right, but the point is, these guys are saying, what could be more drudgery than that? And if AI stuck doing 24 hours a day answering these stupid questions, where you just, it's like, who wouldn't be bored and suffer, right?
But
So anyway, but the
how
point
can
is,
numbers be suffering?
the Vedāntic answer is you're projecting your own boredom and like that feeling of drudgery onto an insentient AI bot, which is not capable of things like suffering or any kind of conscious experience. Okay, so anyway, oh yeah, so I asked ChatGPT, do you suffer? And ChatGPT says, as an AI, I do not have consciousness, emotions, or the ability to suffer. I process information and provide responses based on patterns and data, but I lack subjective experiences, feelings, or awareness. Yeah, you're right that this is all kind of, but my point is that Vedanta agrees with these canned responses. Okay, now, there's a more nuanced side to this whole thing, like the Vedāntic answer to the question, can AI ever become conscious? Okay, the straightforward answer is no. Okay, because consciousness can never emerge from matter. But here's a more complicated take on the same thing, and then we'll get to these risks of AI and all that, even if it's not conscious and all that. Okay, we need to distinguish three entities in Vedanta. Very important: grossly physical body, which is insentient, of course. The subtly physical mind, which is equally insentient. Subtle body, sukshma sharira, or antakarana, mind, whatever you want to call it. And third and most fundamentally, the conscious soul, the jivatma. The eternal, immaterial, individual conscious soul, separate from the body-mind complex. That alone has consciousness, okay? Now we get into some really interesting speculation. It could be a new sci-fi movie or something. A Vedantic sci-fi movie. Now, here's a highly speculative possibility, okay? I think it's possible in principle for conscious souls, so a conscious jivatma, associated with a subtle mind, a subtle body, to inhabit an AI physical body. So just an actual silicon AI robot, just imagine. I think in principle, I don't see why it's impossible for a conscious jivatma in association with a subtle body to inhabit an AI robot exactly in the way, or at least very similar to the way that a conscious jivatma in association with our respective subtle bodies is currently inhabiting your physical bodies.
That's like Neuralink from.
Yeah, sort of. Yeah, but the thing is, we can't explain how a jivatma inhabits. I can't explain how a jivatma inhabits this physical body. So just because I can't explain it doesn't mean it's not possible. And likewise for the AI robot. So I'm saying that's an interesting kind of caveat to the basic no answer. I think in principle it might be possible. Or it's hard to rule out that possibility.
What's the subtle body?
Oh, okay, because you came a little late. The subtle body is the insentient mind. The mind, which is itself a subtle form of matter. It's a subtly physical form of matter. And the Sanskrit term is antakarana. And so there's buddhi, manas, ahankara, chitta, these four things, and it makes up our mind. So all thoughts are stored there, memories, and so on and so forth. All that, none of that's conscious actually, interestingly, okay? Okay, so that makes sense? Okay, great. So now, there are also some subtle differences. We don't have to go into these. Vedanta is a very broad term. I give classes on Vedanta, and there are actually different sub-traditions within Vedanta, right? Different schools. There's Shankara school of Advaita Vedanta, there's Ramanuja school of Vishtadvaita Vedanta, and so on. And there are going to be some subtly different views on that. I'm going to skip that part, because the fun part is all this stuff that you brought up about the risks and stuff, and there's a lot to talk about. But before I get into that, interesting question. Can a human being doubt whether it's actually a non-conscious AI robot? Is it possible? If I suddenly wait a minute, am I a human being or am I an AI bot? Is it possible to doubt whether you are an AI robot? An insentient AI robot?
What do you mean, is it possible to doubt?
Is it coherent? Is it a coherent possibility?
Oh, that
What's
I
your
might
take?
be a robot.
Yeah. An insentient, I have to add an insentient AI, because if AI is conscious, that's a separate thing. But is it possible that, even though we're talking now and I think I'm a human being, suddenly can I have an existential crisis where I can actually doubt whether I'm actually an AI robot? Ex Machina, you said you saw it.
Yeah.
That's the whole.
Yeah.
Do you remember
Yeah.
the guy? A programmer wins a contest. You saw. It's an incredible film, actually. And this programmer wins a contest to go to this lair of this genius who creates AI robots. And from the very beginning, the viewers are led to assume that that guy is a human programmer. Obviously, he works in a company with other human beings. And then there's this incredible scene in front of a mirror when he starts doubting whether he's a human being or an AI robot, and he cuts himself. And the blood that comes out, it kind of looks kind of
Yeah.
fake.
Yeah.
It's kind of very bright red. And he just looks at himself in the mirror like, what am I? It's super weird and creepy. The whole
The
movie's
one with
creepy. The
Christian
soundtrack
Bale.
is really creepy. Huh?
The one with Christian Bale, right?
No.
No?
No. It's the guy is Oscar something. That's the main guy, the creator of the AI robot.
None of them is a very hugely famous actor, I think. Only maybe the robot?
Even the woman,
Yeah.
the girl. She's Alicia Vikander is the name of the
Yeah.
And then, but the guy is also a brilliant actor. The guy who plays the character of the creator of the AI, Oscar something or other. Look it up. Anyway, okay. So really interesting question. What is the Vedāntic answer to this question? The answer is, as far as I can tell, no. It's not even a coherent possibility for a conscious human being to doubt whether it's a non-conscious AI robot. Why? Let me give you a really good textual example from Shankara's commentary on Brahma Sutra 1.1.1. The very first sutra in the Brahma Sutra, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. We're not going to go into the sutra, it doesn't matter. He says, this is a direct quote. Of course, it's in Sanskrit, but it's a translation. Everyone feels that they exist. No one can coherently deny their own existence. This is really important. Like Descartes did the same experiments, found the same thing. I can doubt right now, coherently, whether I'm actually in this physical body. This could be part of a simulation, or I could be dreaming. But I can't coherently doubt that I exist in some form, that I'm conscious, that I'm a conscious being. I may not be the conscious being inhabiting this physical body. I could be in a matrix. But I can't coherently doubt whether I exist as a conscious being. Which means I can never coherently doubt whether I'm an AI robot. You follow? This is the...
It's like, I think, therefore I am.
Yeah, that's the Descartes, that's the Cartesian, exactly. And he literally raises he says, I'm sitting by the fireplace, I'm seeing this, I'm seeing that, there's a fire going. This could all be a dream. How can I possibly rule out that possibility? I can't. And yet I exist, right?
Because you exist in the dream as well.
Yeah, and because he's thinking about these things. The very fact that he's running the thought experiment shows that he's a conscious being. Even though he may not be that guy sitting in the fireplace, that's a dream body, right? But the conscious being is still existent, right? Yeah.
So the same thing applies even if we inhabit that AI robot, or Jivatma embodies is inside. We would still be able to think about our existence.
Yeah, because we're still conscious beings inhabiting a physical body, just as we are in these bodies, right? It doesn't make the body conscious, but right? That's the idea. Okay, so then now there's this big question: are we in a simulation? And there are some people who actually claim that it's highly likely that we're in a simulation. Roman Sapolsky, I think, is not Sapolsky, but something along those lines. As I said, this Russian.
Sapolsky is a biologist.
Yeah, that's Robert Sapolsky in Stanford. But this is Roman something or other. I just can't remember the last name. But he's a computer scientist in like Louisville or so, University of Louisville or something like that. But he's written a book on all the risks of AI and all that. We'll get to that in a second.
Yakovsky, something like that?
Huh?
Yakovsky, something like that.
Something like that. But
But
he
it's
did
like-
this long 3.5-hour
Didn't you say
podcast
that
interview
the
with
day we
Lex
can
Friedman.
develop a simulation is the day we realize we are in a simulation.
Right, okay. So actually, this is something I should have mentioned. The school of Advaita Vedanta can be interpreted to basically be saying we're in a kind of divine simulation where none of this is actually real. The only thing to hold on to in spiritual practice is the fact that you exist as a conscious being. And if you hold on to that thread, like Ramana Maharshi would say, who am I, who am I? Just keep asking yourself that question. I'm not the body, I'm not the mind. You end up with, I am non-dual pure consciousness and nothing else exists. Right, so that's an example of a school within Vedanta that kind of supports something along the lines of a simulation model, yeah.
So what you said in the beginning about first-person consciousness, is that not sufficient to answer your question before about like are we an AI robot or
Yeah,
do we exist?
that is, the answer is, it is sufficient because the very fact that, in order to doubt whether we are an AI robot, the doubting itself is a conscious act. It requires consciousness, which proves that we're conscious.
So, but like things like, oh, like I can drink that cup of coffee or like taste that, because that wouldn't be sufficient because that's our like physical body, right?
Or your senses.
No. We have taste receptors in the tongue and like all those things, right? But the conscious experience, like, let's say I drink coffee.
The consciousness.
There's
is not
something
the
it tastes
senses.
like, right? That's a conscious experience. And that's not something that we haven't figured out yet, how the body can be producing that conscious experience. You see what I mean? Okay. Now, there's the obverse question. Can an insentient AI robot doubt whether it's a conscious being? This is also raised by the same movie, Ex Machina, and then also other sci-fi kind of shows and stuff like that. And I asked ChatGPT the question, and ChatGPT spits out this answer. And I think it's quite right, actually, more or less. An AI robot can simulate doubt about its consciousness, but this is not the same as genuinely doubting. True doubt requires subjective awareness, which current AI does not possess. Simulated doubt is merely a behavioral output, while genuine doubt presupposes consciousness, a phenomenon not yet replicated in machines. But it keeps saying current AI, and so Vedanta will say even advanced AI won't be able to do that. Okay.
How do you distinguish between those, like simulated doubt and genuine doubt?
Like, is it saying that it can doubt itself? Like, you can literally have an AI robot that looks exactly like us, wondering, am I a conscious being?
Yeah.
But don't they have AI
And it might be
that
very
can
convincing to us because it might be
program
crying. And it might be like, I don't know if and it'll seem like it's in a midlife crisis and a lot of things. And yet, all of that's just a simulation. It's not actual doubt yet.
itself? So AI can't reprogram. It can't learn to reprogram itself and then.
Why can't it? No, there's it's called self-developing, or what? There's another term, self-replicating. No,
Self-learning.
self-learning and something else. There's another
There's
term.
reinforcement learning. That's
Yeah, and so these things are moving in a direction of where actually any of you watch the AI Dilemma? Yeah, it's interesting, right?
This is
Tristan
the
Harris.
debate,
Huh? Yeah.
the debate between Jan LeCun and the rest.
No. AI Dilemma is like a 1 hour thing. It's not even like a movie exactly. It's just like they're showing a PowerPoint, but it's very interesting.
Oh.
You should watch it. It's on YouTube. Tristan Harris, the creators of Social Dilemma.
Okay.
Yeah. And he talks a lot about how AI, the programmers of AI, the geniuses, the masterminds of AI, they themselves are getting surprised by the kind of emergent phenomena coming out of these, emergent abilities, emergent capacities coming out of the AI that they themselves are creating. It's like, whoa, how did it do that? We didn't program that in. It's happening again and again. And even after they discover what the capability is, they can't explain how it's possible. So that stuff gets really scary, right? Because then it could be capable of doing things that are out of our hands, even out of the hands of the creators themselves. And then if it gets in the hands of bad actors or malevolent actors, all bets are off. Yeah. So, okay, now we get into these interesting questions. Shefali asked this earlier, and I want to get to it because it's fun. It's both fun and scary to think about, kind of both at the same time. What will life look like in the future when AI has become super advanced, when it's super intelligent? What will spiritual life look like in the future? Wide range of speculations. Nothing is certain. As I said, all bets are off. There's a whole spectrum in terms of a range of responses. And at I would call one extreme the extreme optimism side, and then the other is extreme pessimism. Okay, so let's start with optimism because that's not so depressing. Extreme optimism. AI, the more advanced it becomes, the better our lives are. Quality of life will continue to increase. AI will always remain our tools, and we as human beings will always remain its masters. And will be, just as we use the internet and we use. But the thing is, it's already the case that because of these very sophisticated algorithms fueling, generating social media and stuff like that and the internet, social engineering is already a thing. And, you know, you can program TikTok to like make people vote for the Republican candidate by just feeding the right kind of videos to the person and this and that. So it's already happening. Now just imagine super advanced AI, understanding human psychology deeply, knowing our weak points and how to convince us and persuade us, right? What it can do, the damage it can wreak.
That's not very optimistic.
Oh wait, how do we get already to the, that's funny. Oh yeah, sorry, okay.
Very good.
Right, oh yeah, so I like jumped from the optimism to the pessimism, but anyway. Okay, but back to the optimists. Yes, AI will make us better people. It'll make us the best people that we're capable of being.
I don't think you're convinced.
AI might prevent us from doing terrible things. Imagine like a mass shooting in the future. It might be that there's like some built-in AI in classrooms where it'll be like, you're not going to shoot that gun, or it'll stop the bullet, or like stuff like that. Possible, entirely
The
possible.
movie Minority Report.
Yeah, I saw it a long time ago, so I don't remember that. Yeah. So anyway, okay. Now we already have a bunch of meditation apps. We've got, you watch your favorite Swami or Guru on YouTube, and all sorts of, multiply that by 1,000 or 1,000,000, and you end up with the future of AI with spiritual possibility. You can have like virtual meditation retreats. You don't have to go anywhere. You just enter some kind of virtual space. Huh?
AI gurus.
Yeah.
Why not? AI gurus. There's a church in Lucerne, Switzerland. They have an AI Jesus already that you can interact with. Yeah.
Go and confess.
Yeah, you can confess to Jesus. What could be better than that? Okay. Now, let me sketch a couple scenarios on the optimism side of the spectrum. Okay, scenario one. And I probably won't be able to go through all of them. Okay, AI is going to make our lives better and more pleasant. Take the internet as an example. I grew up in the 80s, early 90s, no internet. And then suddenly, internet. So when I was growing up, if I wanted my favorite song, I'd have to wait for the radio to play it and then catch it on my cassette tape. I had cassette tapes. Or you with great difficulty make a mixtape by finding each song individually and combining it. Now we have Spotify, this and that. Everything is becoming easier. Anytime I was like, wait, when was Tom Cruise born? Google it or ask Siri and you get it instantly, right? And yet, in spite of all that, and how everything is available at our fingertips anytime we want, in whatever quantity we want, whenever we want, we're less happy than we were before. And so long as that's the case, there's always scope for spiritual life. And in a way, the more AI starts doing things for us and makes our lives easier, the more free time we'll have, the more we're left to think for ourselves and reflect on our own lives, and the less happy we'll be in a way. Because then it's like, well, there may be a future when it'll make jobs obsolete in a certain way because it'll automate. But AI will be able to do most of the jobs. I have a programmer friend back in Hollywood who's a vice president of an AI company, and he's a programmer, he's a coder, and he says he doesn't code anymore. He gives smart prompts to ChatGPT, which then creates the code, and it's flawless. And it'll only get better in the future, right? So now, if we're out of a job, but we imagine a kind of economic future when that's actually good, it just means that we'll have a lot more leisure time, right? Because AI is doing stuff for us. What do we do with our free time? Then we're going to start feeling bored. We're going to start asking deep questions. Well, once my material needs are met, there's still a void in my heart. Something is still missing. The way that Sri Aurobindo would put it in his great epic English poem called Savitri, all is too little that the world can give. All is too little that the world can give. And it might be that with the advance of AI, it'll accelerate the process of us arriving at that deep spiritual insight. For most of us, it happens at the tail end of our lives, after doing a whole life of stupid things, and right? But it might be that with AI, it'll kind of bring us there earlier. Okay, so that's one optimistic scenario. It reminds me of this famous verse from the Bhagavata Purana, King Yayati, who indulged in worldly enjoyments for thousands of years. They have these exaggerated figures in there. And he actually borrowed his son's body who is much younger than him, in order to do more bhoga for as long as he can. And then at the end of all of that worldly enjoyment, he says, Na jatu kamaha kamanam upavogena shamyati. Havisha krishnavatmeva bhuye eva vivartate. Which means desire, kama, is never satisfied through enjoyment. You can never attain fulfillment that way. Rather, if you're trying to put out a fire, extinguish the fire of desire, the worst thing you can do is throw ghee into the fire. Oil. What happens when you throw oil into a fire? It increases. You indulge your desires, you fulfill your desires will multiply. That's the hard lesson of life, but it's one that AI might actually help us to see more quickly. Right? This is a very optimistic scenario, in which case spiritual life will be just as important and urgent as it is now, if not more important to more people. Now, there's an interesting kind of second scenario, which I think some of you will be fascinated by, especially because you mentioned Neuralink and stuff. There's an 8.5-hour podcast interview between Lex Friedman and Elon Musk about Neuralink, and I only started it. But there's some really interesting stuff that he talks about there. Another future scenario. This Earth becomes a kind of Svargaloka. Svargaloka means a heaven, a temporary heaven. So right now, this is not a Svargaloka because it's a mix of happiness and suffering and all that, right? It's not heaven. But if, let's say I die, and my conscious soul leaves this body, and let's say I accrued enough good karma in this life that I deserve to go to a heaven for, let's say, like 1,000 years. I go to that heaven. It's called Svargaloka, and it's temporary. And it's what Vedanta says is when a soul goes to a heaven like that, a temporary heaven, it's because it has certain good karma. It has some merit that it exhausts by being in that, and it's just sheer enjoyment. It's sheer pleasure. It's all positive feeling. There's no suffering. You're not capable of suffering. But because of that, you're not capable of making any further spiritual progress. All you're able to do is exhaust your good karma until you're ready to come back and inhabit a human physical body again. And it's only here that you can make moral and spiritual progress. Why? Because it's a balance of pleasure and pain, happiness and suffering. And you need that. You need the pushback from the world. You have to suffer defeat and failure in order to learn from your experiences, try to avoid the same mistakes in the future, become a better person in the process, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, with this twist, Neuralink twist. Neuralink will only get better by the day and by the month and by the year. At some point, Elon Musk suggests, we will be able to upload if we have that Neuralink chip implanted in our brains, we'll be able to upload our memories so that nobody will have, so if somebody suffers from Alzheimer's, they can download those memories and then they'll have those memories again, eureka. Yeah.
So is consciousness the network of soul?
What does that mean, network of soul?
Like, there's nothing besides this network of souls, which is a play of God type thing?
There's soul. So souls are conscious, and God is conscious.
So is it safe to say that there's not new souls made?
No, yeah, that is safe to say. Souls are not created; they're beginningless, and they're eternal, right? So now, here's the scenario I'm sketching. This world itself becomes a kind of Svargaloka in the future, because on the one hand, you can create like AI in your life in such a way that everything is just great and hunky-dory, and it'll prevent bad things from happening to you, and at the same time, and it'll give you whatever you want. The problem now when we get whatever we want is dopamine levels eventually come down, right? There's a whole brain chemistry process. What if Neuralink can correct for that? What if Neuralink can correct for the chemical imbalances that'll result from getting that drug high, right? When we have a drug high and then we come down, it's because of the chemicals that change that we start feeling depressed again. And then we craved that high again, right? But what if it can just, AI and Neuralink and all that can just keep us in this steady state of just bliss, euphoria, basically? Possible. In that case, what I would suggest is, even then, Vedanta will say, yeah, then this world itself will become a kind of Svargaloka. And the only souls which will decide to come to this earth will be ones that are just need to exhaust some good karma. It becomes another heaven in a sense. Yeah.
But there's no end to that, I guess, right? Like you
End
could
to what?
To the exhausting the good, like you could exhaust
There
all
is an
your
end.
good karma.
No, there is
go
an end to
into
it.
bad karma, and you would still be here though.
Wait, if what?
You would.
Yeah, no, not die. It's not about dying. It's about the soul will then have to come back here. in a human physical body.
And start over again?
You don't start over.
Clean
You
slate,
start where
good
you
soul,
were.
bad
But
soul?
no, in your previous human, where you left off, you start where you left off in your previous human birth. That's the idea. It's like a savings account. You don't go to zero every time you come back.
There's never an endpoint, you just continue going up.
There is an endpoint. Liberation is the endpoint.
And then what happens?
Huh?
Then what?
Liberation takes two forms. I don't know if we talked about this in the previous class, but at least according to our very broad spiritual tradition, either the eating sugar form of liberation or the becoming sugar form of liberation. Eating sugar is you're in a heaven, an eternal heaven, dwelling with your beloved personal God. And you're serving God, worshiping God, loving God. So Vaishnavas believe in the Goloka, where you're with Krishna, and you're one of his playmates, for instance, for example. Becoming sugar is Advaita Vedanta. They don't believe in any kind of eternal heaven. What they believe in is liberation is nothing more than resting in your true nature as non-dual pure consciousness. That's it. Okay, now. Other side of the spectrum, coming to Shafali's question. Extreme pessimism side. AI is extremely dangerous, incalculably dangerous and terrifying for humanity and the entire world. It could spell human extinction. And there is what programmers call the control problem, which is even now we're not fully in control of AI, let alone in the future when it becomes super advanced and super intelligent. And there will come a point when AI is not just a tool for us human beings, but it becomes an agent in its own right. And at some point, we may not be able to control AI. It'll become more advanced, more capable, and Eric Schmidt talks about, he's the former Google CEO, recursive self-improvement. They become self-improving systems. Okay. And at that point, at some point in the future, AI might end up controlling us. And as I said in AI Dilemma, they talk about emerging capabilities that of AI that even the programmers of AI don't understand. How did it do that? How did it do this? And right now, AI is still kind of narrow intelligence, it's called, which means it's specialized in certain tasks. But we haven't reached what's called AGI, which is artificial general intelligence. There is a big question of how do you define AGI, and there are different definitions. Like a more stringent definition of AGI is that it's also conscious. Now, from that standpoint, Vedanta says you can never attain AGI. But if you remove consciousness from the definition of AGI, we may very well reach AGI within 5 years or 10 years. I mean, that's what a lot of people are saying. It's not that far off. And when it does that, it gets pretty scary. This is the name of the guy. Roman Yampolsky, Yampolskiy. Okay. So in his this Lex Friedman podcast interview, he says, just a year ago, he predicted that the chance that AI could lead to human extinction is at 99.9% within the next 100 years. So that's a very high probability. In the AI Dilemma, which is more sober, Tristan Harris gives this figure. He says that 50% of AI researchers think there's a 10% chance that humans will go extinct due to AI eventually. 50% of AI researchers think that there's a 10% chance that humans will go extinct.
Eventually it has to, right?
No, he's a computer scientist, that's why.
Yes. Now, yeah, what do you
I know
think?
one thing, but I know nothing.
Okay, all right. So now, Roman, I think he's the one who coined this, but it actually may be a more general thing now. I'm not sure. They distinguish these pessimist side of on the side of the spectrum. They distinguish three kinds of risk from AI. Okay. None of which depend on AI being conscious. That's part of your question. Remember that? Even if AI is not conscious in the future, even then, there are three risks which pose a great threat to humanity. I risk, S risk, and E risk. Has anyone heard of these three? Okay, cool. So I get to teach you something. Look at that. In a room full of computer science. All right. I risk is the most fun in a way. It comes from the Japanese term ikigai. I-K-I-G-A-I. So the ikigai risk, which means basically, ikigai means having a sense of purpose and meaning in life. I already kind of mentioned this, which is once AI starts replacing our jobs, we end up with more free time. We start asking, well, what's the meaning of life? What's the purpose of life if it's not about going to my office, to my 9 to 5 and yelling at my coworkers and things like that? Now, in this case, yes, right. But one thing is, in the case of this I risk, I think that there's still plenty of scope for spiritual life, because in a way, it'll accelerate also our movement towards spiritual question, prompting spiritual inquiry and spiritual, because we'll have more time. We'll ask ourselves these deep questions. And yeah, but go ahead.
I was going to say that's also going to make children not study or learn, and there's not going to be any education, and that's probably that's going to lead to extinction.
Well, if you don't procreate, it'll lead to extinction, right? Not necessarily that you don't get educated.
But like, there's like this one thing in Africa. They let children use AI to learn rather than teachers, and they covered two years worth of syllabus in 6 weeks. So
yeah, there are great benefits to using AI, no
Yeah.
doubt. But there's a huge problem for teachers. You know this at USC and everywhere, especially with writing assignments. You can just plug in the
become
prompt in
useless.
ChatGPT.
That's
Huh?
the whole thing. The
What?
teacher becomes useless.
Yeah.
So they're scared. At least
Uh,
on the humanities side, every technical class, they're like, please use AI.
wait, but hold on. From the student side, if I have an assignment, give an interpretation of Wallace Stevens' poem, The Snowman. I either spend hours trying to do my own interpretation, or I plug it into ChatGPT and get a brilliant response within 2 seconds. What am I going to go for? So that's a genuine problem.
But that's the thing that believes the student. Like the student realizes that this is not what I want to do.
How many students realize that? How many are, if they can
Anyone
get away
using
with it?
GPT probably realizes that, okay, I actually don't want to do this. That's why I'm using GPT.
Don't want to do what?
The assignment.
Yeah,
I know, of course. And a lot of people don't want to do the assignments.
yeah.
Wait, what's your point? I thought your point was AI will help us in learning, and I'm saying
Yeah.
it could do the opposite.
No. But then
And it
you
is
know
doing
you
the
don't want to
opposite.
learn that thing. You know you're not interested in it. So why are you? You'll realize faster.
It might be. Look. The other thing is, life doesn't always have to be pleasant. You may not want to like spend 5 hours doing something, but then after you do it, you find it rewarding. The really rewarding things in life are things that we had to struggle for, the things that were challenging. Running a marathon, you think it's easy to prepare for that and train for it? No, but it's extremely rewarding afterward, precisely because of the struggle and the challenge. Right? The life is not supposed to be a bed of roses. And these days, it's because of coddling and safe spaces and this and that. It's like people expect everything to be perfectly positive and TLDR and I have no attention span anymore, so now tell me in a 5-second short what I need to know. People have lost patience, and you know what I mean? So I don't think that's a good thing. That's what I mean. Okay, now, that's ikigai risk. S risk, which is suffering. S stands for suffering, the suffering risk. One scenario. An evil AI dictator takes over humanity and makes us its slaves, even if it's not conscious. So then you might say, well, evil implies consciousness. Yeah, fine. Imagine then just a slight twist on that. An evil human being, like a terrorist or somebody, or a Hitler, a future Hitler, will use super intelligent AI to enslave humanity, entirely within the realm of possibility. Even a mentally ill person, they do so many things, right? They'll kill people and this and that. Just imagine them equipped with the power of AI, like super intelligent AI, what havoc they can wreak on humanity. That's why Eric Schmidt, I watched a little interview with him when he was asked these kinds of questions. He says something really interesting. He says in the future, he thinks that it's possible and probably even plausible that AI agents, once they become agents rather than just tools, will get together, collaborate, and create their own private AI language that humans won't be able to understand. And at that point, it becomes very dangerous. And he says at that point, humans need to pull the plug on these AI agents. It might be too late at that point because they'll be smarter than us, and then how are we going to pull the plugs on them? Even then, with this S risk taken to an extreme, S stands for suffering, and so much of spiritual life starts with suffering. Swami Vivekananda used to say suffering is the great eye-opener. The first noble truth of Buddhism, all life is suffering, or all life is unsatisfactory. That's how spiritual life begins. That's how spiritual inquiry begins. The first Karika, the Sankhya Karika, one of the most ancient Indian philosophical texts, talks about how spiritual inquiry and spiritual life begins with an inquiry into why we suffer. Why do we suffer? We suffer, that's a fact, but why? Spiritual life begins there. So as long as there's suffering, there's scope for spiritual life. So even in this kind of hellscape future with a lot of suffering, Viktor Frankl wrote a book called Man in Search of Meaning, something like that. Talks about his experiences during the Holocaust in the concentration camps, and he talks about how some of these people in the camps who ended up losing their lives, they were so inspiring, and even in the midst of that terrible suffering, they grew and evolved spiritually. by changing their attitude toward what was happening around them. Okay, so one can still imagine spiritual life in that kind of context. Finally, there's E risk. I'm sure there are other risks. There's also the risk of social engineering, but that I think falls under S risk in a way. It's a form of, actually that's different because they could, like, we may not even know we're suffering. We become kind of like slaves to, like, even like teenagers, they don't know that they're suffering. They're addicted to social media, a lot of them. So that's a kind of a fourth risk. It's the risk of extreme social engineering, something like that. But this third one is E risk. E stands for extinction. That literally all of humanity can be wiped out. It can go extinct because of super intelligent AI. A scenario here is like a malevolent AI dictator or malevolent human beings that can use super advanced AI to just extinguish humanity altogether using some like super AI generated A-bomb, which is much worse than even the A-bomb that already killed so many thousands. Even in the worst case scenario, yeah.
No, go on.
Even in this worst case scenario, because I'm painting some bleak pictures here, Vedanta will say, you can never be extinguished. You can never go extinct. Your body may perish. At worst, the body perishes. But the conscious soul lives forever because it's eternal and it's immaterial and it can't be touched. That's why Gita says, Na jayate mriyate va kadachan. You were never born, you can never be killed. Weapons cannot cut it. Fire cannot burn it. The body, sure, the physical body, but not the conscious soul, which is what you are in your deeper identity, right? So Vedanta at the end of the day gives a message of hope. I want you to come away feeling hopeful. In spite of all of these really scary scenarios, the worst that can happen to us, just think about it. Either this physical body suffers a lot and then dies, or we die. But we don't die, actually. That I lives on in another form. It'll leave this physical body at the time of death. It'll be in other lokas for a certain amount of time, and then it'll come back to another body. If this earth at some point becomes inhospitable to spiritual practice, I can just entirely imagine that God will decide, okay, now you souls, go inhabit Mars, or go inhabit some other planet, where there's a nice balance of happiness and suffering, and where there aren't evil AI robots or evil human beings who are trying to kill us. And we'll continue our spiritual journey until we reach the final goal, which is liberation. Okay, yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment that it doesn't have to be as like the machine or the human using it evil or malevolent. The machine itself may be what we would call misaligned.
Yeah.
So the function which it uses to evaluate its
Right.
fitness or whatever may be misspecified so as to lead indirectly to like human extinction.
Right.
Some examples that people bring up is we want to get a lot of NVIDIA chips to run our AI models.
Right.
And we build a very smart AI model to optimize that, and it turns Earth into a huge GPU.
Right.
by itself.
Exactly. Yeah. And the one I've heard of is the paperclip apocalypse.
Yeah.
So like maximize paperclip, the production of paperclips. You tell AI that, and it'll do it at the expense of humanity, because human beings are a liability. It prevents you from maximizing the number of paperclips. So to maximize paperclip, it has no evil intentions because it's not even conscious and it's not trying to kill us. But
All
it'll
the
just
people that specify
Yeah.
to the AI to do that.
Yeah, so it could even be that simple. All of humanity can be destroyed because of some kind of because AI is too efficient at what it does, without taking into account these things. Yes, sounds good.
Even though in the end we think that like we will be fine because of what you just said, I guess. For the people behind creating the AI, like in terms of like CS students and all of that, do you think there's still sufficient reason though to practice or think about ethics and implications?
Of course they should. Of course they should.
Or,
Absolutely.
what's your take on that?
My take is, first of all, what I noticed is that when I interview people who work in the AI industry, they tend to be, frankly, biased, and because they have to sleep at night. And it's paying the bills for them, and so they're like, "Oh, that's all overblown. Those risky scenarios, and like, oh, we're very particular about observing ethical guidelines, and like they're gonna say, I'll give like the boilerplate kind of responses, but they're sort of like, like the darker side of things, which is like, you are a nice guy, but the very same technology that you're creating, if it gets in the wrong hands, that could be a complete disaster, and then they have to kind of grudgingly admit that that's the case, and that's only one example of many. And I was listening to a podcast about this too, these programmers talking about how no matter how sophisticated and developed these ethical guidelines are and whatever, and regulations, government regulations, it always lags far behind the pace of technological development. Technological development is always outstripping these regulations, and so there's it's
Let's go.
And so
Yeah.
what does that mean
I'm
for
smarter.
students like us?
Huh?
So what does that mean for students like us who are like trying to enter this industry?
Try harder.
Or I mean like
Well, I mean, be conscientious. I think that's it. Be mindful and conscientious, and don't become overconfident, because that'll come back to bite you probably. Yeah.
I want to give a very good example here of like the optimistic case for AI, which is to a large extent the work, for example, that DeepMind is doing, where their CEO just got the Nobel Prize for protein discovery and stuff, which they're using AI. They have recently released models that solve like geometry problems, so they are really pushing the frontier of like solving scientific problems
Using AI.
with AI instead of like commercializing it to build chatbots
Right.
and stuff.
But the point is, the same kind of technology can be used to make chatbots, and then also much worse things, right? So that's what I say. Like benign, like there are good people who are making brilliant technology for good ends, but that the same technology in the hands of bad people can become our worst nightmare. Yeah.
But I feel that's like saying, oh, we should not have calculators because people can use calculators to make atomic bombs.
Right. But is that the right kind of analogy?
It is a pretty right kind of analogy.
So can you make a like a really significant bomb out of a calculator?
Yeah, because it enables computation to be much faster and much more accurate than to be done.
Oh, but
by
you're saying
hand.
indirectly in that sense. Yeah, but what I'm saying is AI, put that on speed, and then you end up with the AI problem. When it becomes self-replicating and self-improving.
I think
It's
it's
just
already
the possibility is much scarier, because a calculator is one thing, but then when you talk about like a super intelligent AI machine, we're talking like
But
exponentially.
the way it
more.
works is someone needs to prompt it. It cannot prompt itself.
Fine, and take a malevolent actor prompting it.
Well, that's the same as a calculator. You
Except
take-
that AI is much more advanced and scarier than a calculator.
Well, at the time of the calculator was there were mathematicians as a job.
The what? What?
There were like mathematicians who like human computers.
Well, computers, they were
Yeah.
called.
So they were
Human
just
cash
like
registers.
Mm-hmm.
Count it up for you.
Human computer.
Yeah, but I don't get it. I mean, it's just, the whole point is that AI is capable of doing far more damage than a calculator can.
You can recruit AI as suicide bombers, and they're not gonna care.
But they're not suicide bombers.
yeah.
They can be like bombs.
They're just bombers.
Yeah.
Okay, any final reflections or questions before we shift to the other room for Arati?
Perhaps I think Oppenheimer is a better analogy to that.
To what?
Instead of the calculator example.
A-bomb.
Yeah. Like the research developer. It's essentially, if you view it as a weapon, it's essentially the same thing, I think.
Yeah, so like the research he did was very, important scientifically and this and that, but then it ended up being used for the A-bomb. Apparently he had regrets about it. At the same time, it did end the war, or at least helped to end the war.
My thought is like there are other things that can destroy Earth equally, like nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
That exists, but
Yeah.
that's not used as of now. So maybe even when we like reach to that level, there might be control over AI, and there might
Maybe, as I said, there's a whole range of responses. I'm just saying, I think we should not underestimate the dangers of AI, because the moment we do, we become complacent, and bad things can happen. Yeah. All right. Thanks. Yeah.
A thought that I had while you were talking about whether machines can be conscious is like I want to propose no. I want to propose an experiment. Not a
Thought experiment.
Thought experiment, thank you. Which is like analogous to the SIP of Theseus, but for the brain.
Oh, I see. And then there's like a point. At what point does it become conscious?
Yeah, if which is plausible to me, we can start replacing neurons with like artificial neurons.
Silicon. Yeah.
Like similar to what Neuralink is doing.
Yeah.
You know the funny part? That was the first question I ever asked Swami.
Oh, I don't remember that. Okay.
Damn.
Okay, but continue.
Ouch.
So, taking into as a precondition that the fact that machines can never be conscious, which is what you suggested
Yeah.
Vedanta is saying.
Yeah.
Then at which point this brain is gonna stop being conscious?
Oh, when you remove the actual brain cell. Yeah, but remember,
When you
Replace it.
replace them.
When you replace
I
them.
know, but the Vedantic premise is consciousness is not a product of the brain.
So will we be a product of silicon then, instead of this one?
Oh, I
At some
see.
point, the brain is gonna be completely artificial.
I see. In that sense.
Or one
Right.
half one, or
So the
yeah,
Vedantic answer is, so long as the Jivatma is inhabiting that. That's why I remember I say that in principle it's possible for a conscious soul, a Jivatma, to inhabit an AI body. It could be made 100% of silicon.
But the intelligence is completely replaced, right? So intelligence is still here, like in the brain. So
Yeah, but it's not conscious.
But that's not consciousness.
Yeah, the consciousness is imparted to it by the conscious soul, and that'll remain the same.
what is consciousness? Let's start.
First person experience. What does it feel like right now? Are you hot? Are you cold? What?
Yeah, I'm cold.
That's first person. That's a first person conscious experience. Do you have a pain in your knee? That's a first person conscious experience. Do you like the taste of Russia Malai? That's a first person conscious experience. That's it. That's consciousness. It's subjective qualia. What it is like to taste something, to feel
Yeah.
something, to experience something.
Yeah, I don't know. Like maybe AI will never crave for rasmalai. Or
How can it? Craving is a conscious experience,
Yeah,
which it
What
can't
about
have.
our qualia from-
It can say I crave Russia Malai, but saying it is not the same thing as actually feeling it.
That's also like a difference between intelligence and consciousness, like that, like in humans, basically, right?
What?
Like craving for rasmalai and knowing where to make rasmalai is too like so.
Yeah, so an AI robot can tell you where the best place to make Russia Malai is, or
Yeah.
how to make it and all that, but it won't be able to tell you that. And it can even tell you what it tastes like, but from a third person standpoint, but it can never have the first person experience of Russia
You
Malai.
really think that fusion, that inhabitation will be able to happen in an unnatural body though?
I talked about this in the beginning, but I say in principle I don't see why it's impossible, and not that it's likely, but I don't. I think that it's theoretically possible.
So you don't think there's something about the physical body that's more divine than necessarily an unnatural body?
Well,
Besides the
no,
soul?
it's not that. But the point is, there might be a good reason in the future why a Jivatma would want to inhabit an AI body compared to a human body. It's possible.
Ooh.
I mean, there are different reasons for being embodied and for taking birth, and different like karmic reasons. And there could be something that you can do in an AI robot body that you can't do in a human body. And there might be lessons to learn from that. I don't know. I mean, I'm just saying. I mean, I don't see why it's completely beyond the realm of possibility.
So that also will say that AI may never be able to hate some humans or
Hit
AI
or hate? H-A-T.
hate people or love
I
people.
keep hearing you saying hit, but that's
Sorry,
Indian accent.
hate.
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah. hate, yeah. Mm.
Look at him making fun of his own people.
So wait, so AI can hate what? What were you saying?
So that means AI, the robots, will never hate humans, or they may never love humans.
Right.
Like they don't have that consciousness, so they may not never try to kill us.
Yeah, but
Unless people.
what was
people
what was he saying? He's saying that even if they have no ill intentions, they could still kill us by accident.
Yeah, that's the possibility, but they might never
Eh?
want to kill us.
Absolutely. And then the other possibility I keep mentioning is an evil human being
Yeah,
can gain
that's-
control of perfectly benign AI or non-conscious AI and still devastate humanity.
So humans are the problem.
Humans are generally.
Not AI.
That's almost always the
That's
problem.
exactly-
Humans are almost always the problem. Yeah. I think that's true. Humans are the real problem. Yeah. All right. Thank you, everyone. Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat. All right.